Hey, it's Coach T. This is my weekly C Sharp self-teaching coding pathway devlog, whatever. There's a lot of words in there in that word salad. But basically in this video, I'm just going to record what I did in the last week. It is now the first week of August. It's August 4th as I'm recording this. I got a brand new microphone because I was sick of yelling at my computer in order to get my voice to pick up. I didn't like that at all. So I picked up a cheap mic on Amazon, and I also started recording some Python teaching videos this week that are in the Quick Code Python playlist on my channel now. Because one of the things that I've learned as I've learned to code over the last year is that I really enjoy explaining the concepts to other people, and in the different learning networks that I'm a part of that I was using, especially when I was first getting started, I still see like the same churn of very basic syntax or very basic function questions. And I thought, hey, I am a trained teacher, I'm a professional coach, so maybe I have kind of a unique advantage on helping other adult learners get over the same hurdles that I have climbed over in the past year. Uh, so I'm going to be uploading like one or two of those a week, mostly through August and September. I kind of went on a rip tear and recorded a whole bunch because I was just enjoying it. So every time I had an idea, I'd come back downstairs and I'd record another video and show something how it works. Because I'm looking at Reddit, or I'm looking at YouTube, or I'm looking at one of the Discords that I'm a part of, and I see a basic beginner question, and I'm like, oh, let's not just explain in text how this thing works. Let's actually show how it works and talk about key components and stuff like that. So that's a long-winded way of saying that this week I did a lot of Python, which I didn't expect to do, but it was really refreshing to go back. And Stefan Mischuk, Uncle Steph on YouTube, one of the things that he said in a number of videos recently is that once you know enough about one language, consider switching over to another so that you can start to appreciate the fineries of both. And he thinks that it will accelerate your learning pathway. Not that you abandon the other one, right? I haven't abandoned Python by any stretch. But having switched from C Sharp to C Sharp for several months and then now flip back, I'm like, oh, I really appreciate some of the things that Python does that are much easier than in C Sharp. But on the flip side, I've really come to appreciate the curly braces and the semicolons that used to be like the bane of my existence. Now I get why a white space sensitive language, can be challenging, and why it might not be the best way to write software, because it's easy to bang the spacebar on accident and then blow your program up because now you've got white space errors. Same thing for like the for loop in Python. I really fought to understand it. It was a bit of a bugbear for like a week. I just couldn't get my head around how the syntax was working and pulling through things through. And then I got it. And that was like a proud moment. That was one of the first really, okay, I think we can tackle these topics one at a time moments for me that put wind in my sails early on. And then I saw the for each loop in C Sharp, and I was like, oh God, it's way more complicated. But now, having used them for the last 2 weeks or so, I'm like, oh no, I understand how to iterate an outer loop and an inner loop and use an I and a j in order to do things. In fact, I even started to use them in arrays, and that's the big banner achievement for this week in my C Sharp journey. Is I have been intimidated by arrays and array math and calling and updating arrays since I was 17. We did it in Java. The teacher basically put the slide up and then for each lesson, and then we were expected to turn around and use it. And at 17, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to learn effectively. I didn't have a environment at home that was conducive to practicing. I didn't have a mentor. I just had a checked out teacher and some friends that could do it on their own because they were independently interested, and then they would just give us the answers. So I was talking with a couple of my buddies yesterday about how there are times in your life where you're not punished for being lazy or taking the short way through. And had you been punished, you'd be a bigger, stronger person. And that's kind of what I feel happened there with some math classes that I took, with computer programming in particular. I got away with sliding through the course. I worked hard on HTML and CSS, but then we hit Java and I just checked out because I had the answers and I didn't have to try. And I remember that it was okay declaring variables and starting to understand curly braces until I hit arrays, and then my brain just went off into the distance, and it never came back. And for years, I have been like, I am too dumb to learn Java. I don't understand enough math to use Java. And so I would look at something like Minecraft that was written in Java, I think, and I'd be shocked because it was spaghetti to me. So now I'm not blinded by curly braces. I understand code flow. I understand variables. I get methods. I can write classes. I can write my own methods to do things. And in some cases, I've run into some functions at work as a teacher where it was actually easier for me to throw together a Python script and just use a console application to really quickly iterate through a ton of information. And I could just plug the information and get what I needed instead of fighting with a spreadsheet or hand rolling the math. And I saved hours in some cases, especially where I was trying to like combine features from different spreadsheets together. I just wrote it into a console app script, and that rocked and rolled. So I have known for the last 2 months. It's August. I started C# the end of July maybe, or the end of June rather. I've known for the last 4 weeks that there was a chapter on arrays. It's in this book. It's in my C# in a day and learn it well book. It's in the Udemy course that I have right here. I knew that arrays were coming, and I am not going to lie that I was intimidated because that word array just has this weight in my memory of you weren't good enough for it. And that was a lie. That was wrong. Because I hit arrays, and I've already done lists in Python, I've done tuples in Python, I've done dictionaries in Python, I've done strings in Python, that's technically a collection too, and I had no issues accessing, overriding, utilizing that information. Those are collections just like arrays, and it was not a big deal to fly through it. And I'm going to scroll down in Christina's course here. This is the one I keep mentioning, the Ultimate Masterclass for 2024 for C# by Christina Slusarczyk. I am sorry, I don't do Polish. Terrible. I'm an American. So I have been flying through this particular course, and I knew that arrays were coming up. Where are you? We're way down here. Break, continue, do while, need for loops. Somewhere in here. Nest, there it is. So this is what she has in her course here. Arrays. Then there's a quiz on arrays, or a coding project. And then there are 2 other coding projects. I don't know if that's a quiz. I can't remember if that's a quiz or not. Multi-dimensional arrays. And that was really where I knew I was going to struggle. And then multi-dimensional arrays for FindMax. And then we do for each loops. I don't know why that comes after arrays. A for each loop is easy. It's just for each card in the deck. I don't know. Oh, there it is. My prop. For each card in the deck, do something, right? That's from the Python videos. And then the out keyword, we're looking at the try parse. That's all stuff that I already know how to do. And partly it's because the scope and sequence in this book and the scope and sequence in the Learn C# in a Day and Learn It Well book, they have different scopes and sequences in the presentation of information. But I knew they were coming, and I was intimidated by them, and I'm not anymore. It took me like 3 hours maybe yesterday or 2 days ago playing with arrays, and I just built a whole bunch. That's the secret. Pause what you're reading, pause what you're watching, and then go code a whole bunch of them. Go do a whole bunch. Go declare a bunch of int arrays with a bunch of different numbers, and then do something with them. Go code an array with a bunch of different names, and then give yourself a variable that's for greeting, and then print to call different names, or print within a for each loop to concatenate the greeting and whatever current element in the array that you're on. Multi-dimensional arrays are a little bit harder, but I worked it into my Dibbles program, which is this thing that I had up. I had talked about, I think in the last video, maybe 2 videos last, but I said I knew I needed to eventually add an array in to have my software do what I wanted to do, which is allow a teacher to plug in a particular oral reading fluency or a maze score, and I have to store that somewhere in the software. And I know that. I'm beginning to think, I think like a programmer, or I believe I'm beginning to think like a programmer, that's clear, rather than using redundant verbs. So I'm thinking, how am I going to store and access this information that the user is inputting? And how do I validate it to make sure that I don't have something like more errors than I read, or I input the letter K where I needed to input, the total numbers of words read. So I'm beginning to anticipate those problems with my to-do list, but I knew, and I said this in the video, I was going to have to work on arrays. And that was something that I put way off. I think I said in a couple weeks, a couple months, I basically did what I have been doing for years and just pushing arrays back. And at this point, if you're listening and you're still here 10 minutes in, you're probably like, this guy has like this irrational fear of arrays. I know I do. It's ridiculous. But I'm getting over it this week. I wrote a whole bunch of arrays. I probably wrote like a dozen of them yesterday just practicing. And then I said, all right, before Christina gives me one of her like surprisingly difficult challenges, I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to get onto the Ubuntu terminal where I prefer to do coding because I don't have Discord and other distractions set up on it. And I'm going to write an array in. And I'm going to turn it into one of the main functions in my software. So it became not title of the console window. It is this one, record student ORF data, which is array practice. And all I did is it just takes an array in a for loop and then it adds it. So I declared, I think you can take 10 originally. The one that I'm going to show you doesn't have the array in it, that original array in it anymore, because I was like, all right, we got it. We can write arrays, we can declare arrays, we can override data in arrays. And then I was like, let's do the multidimensional array. We need to do it. We need to just dive in. So I have the recording the student array, or the student ORF data as an array. That's the fourth option. And then I built my to-do list, right? I broke my big task, my big scary task down into individual sub-steps. This is a revised version because you can see it right away. It says 2D array. So I chose to do a two-dimensional array. So it's going to have width and height. And then that ORF data needs to consist of 2 columns and 10 rows because in the school year we have 10 months. So, element 0 is going to be September, and element 10 or element 9 would, element 10, but technically month 9 would be June, right? And that's what I put over here. And then I've got the total number of correct words read, the total number of incorrect words read. And it turns out you can do a whole bunch of different math with those. I could add a third field and say, I could provide like the number of errors, or the number correct per minute, but I could do that with just these two, So I don't need to prompt the user for anything more than essentially what I need, essentially in the literal sense. So, and then I have a for loop to allow automatic input, so you don't have to keep overriding, and prompting, okay, do you want to do it again? Do you want to do it again? Or do you need to go through the menu to get it again? It just goes until you hit all of your scores or until you punch zeros in, right? You just do. One of the things I want to do is input a break statement to make that even more efficient. But it took me about an hour and a half of practice yesterday while the girls were out at the garage sale thing. So I wanted to allow a user to report out all the scores. That's the next feature that I'm going to add. So that'll probably become like menu option 5, print all stored scores for a given student. And eventually I may need to have a 3-dimensional array that ties all of the 2-dimensional stuff to a particular student. And now I can think about how I might do that. A week ago, I would have just started sweating. That's not great. So I've got, let's scroll up a little bit. So here's how this works. I'm declaring a multidimensional array. It's an int. So everything that's going into the array needs to be an int. And then I've got 10 rows and I've got 2 columns. Then I've got an integer variable, month, right? And that is basically figuring out what row we're on, month. I don't need to name them. There's no reason to name them. We can do it mathematically, and we can do it more elegantly with math. And then we've got columns, and the columns are going the width. So I'm checking to see, okay, how many rows do we have? And then how many columns do we have? And that's that get length method. And I had to look that up. I had to go to the documentation on that because Christina doesn't go over it in the course, and the C# Player's Handbook, if it does go over it, I may have blurred over it and not integrated it into my memory. And then I've got a string, which is a string question mark in case it's null, which is read result. And then I've got the meat of my loop. And this whole thing from here to here allows the teacher, the user, to input as much data as they have on a kid. I can do more with this, but writing this out, this, what is that, 98 to 129, this 21 lines of code was a big breakthrough for me in terms of my confidence in overcoming what was instantiated in my brain at 17, which was that you are too stupid to do this. And that sounds goofy coming from somebody who's been teaching for 10 years. I have a master's degree. I've got 2 bachelor's degrees. I have written books. I run a business. I'm raising kids. But to remember and to carry that, you are too stupid to do this, and never really to admit it aloud to anybody, because why would you? That sucks. And yesterday I realized that it's not only not true, but also it was holding me back from approaching this. Now, was I mature enough 5 or 10 years ago to actually go after this? I don't know. I don't know if the resources would have been there. I don't know if I would have been mature enough. But now I can say, I wrote myself a multi-dimensional array. There are things to do. There's work to do with this, but the skeleton of what I need to do for the user is right here. One of the things I can change about this is, I'm particularly proud of this line. I'll come back to it in a second. But like, if the result is exactly equal to nothing, what I'm doing is I am using the do while loop to basically force the teacher to go through and iterate every time that they would hit enter. So right now it enters this endless loop of you got to put something in. It could be zeros. You put zeros in, it'll move to the next month. Another thing that I don't have is I don't have a break statement that allows the teacher to say, okay, do we want to input another score? Maybe you have a whole data set. It's a new kid that just switched to you and you want to input everything so that they're in your roster. Well, there's no way to do that right now. But that's easy. That's something I could code in here in probably like 5 minutes. I just need to have an if statement that's or another variable that's a read result and just a prompt saying, hey, do you want to continue inputting more information into the array? Yes or no? And then if yes, then reload the loop, and that might become the result of the new do while condition, or maybe while it's blank, or the user response is Y or something like that. And if not, no, break, and then have a secondary break outside of the other for loop, and you just zip right through it. That could be an easily engineered solution for this problem. So I learned in the last week that I'm not too stupid to work on arrays, that I can actually do them. And I also got, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 more hours of experience coding because I was focused on actually writing out what I was learning about. So if there's a message that I can send away from this particular week, it's that you're not too stupid to learn to code, but you may need to slow down and write more code so that you're ready for the next step. And my thought process as a teacher, as a coach, has been for the better part of a decade while I've been doing this, that the learner, and I don't say kid, but the learner needs to be spending 80% of their time practicing what they study in the 20% of the time remaining. Whether that's at the front or at the back, or if it's broken into the middle, 40, 20, 40. It doesn't necessarily matter. But if you're spending all your time reading or watching videos on whatever you're trying to learn about, playing the bagpipes, brewing beer, coding, learning to ride a unicycle, if you're only consuming on how to do it, you're not training your brain to do it. You're training your brain to be attentive to the screen or the paper, which are good skills to have in correct scenarios. But this is proven out every month this year while I worked on SQL and then Python and now C#. If I don't practice the things that I read about, I will lose them. And if I do practice them, I can get farther faster than I anticipate. So that was the big takeaway for this week. This whole week was really boning up on system control of information within the software that I have, and then really, really hammering down on arrays. I took 4 or 5 pages of notes on setting them up, on what they are, on what the limitations are, on pitfalls that Christina and R.B. Whitaker mentioned. I wrote, I think, a dozen different arrays slowly at first, and then throwing them together. I practiced declaring them in different ways because you can declare them with default values, or you can leave that blank and then give the values in. I practiced calling from the array. I did math with the array, right? That's what this line is doing right here. I have a variable saying, okay, it's going to be a double, so it's got a floating point number, or for those who don't know what that is, a decimal point. And then we have an orf array, and it's calling from whatever the current iterated value of I is in my outer for loop right here, I0. So always whatever the current iteration vertically is, and then we're looking at the first box in my table. And I had to draw it out at first. I had to draw it out, and I don't have it on me. It's in the other room with the Ubuntu terminal, but I had to like map out where these things were. And then after doing that for a couple hours over the course of a couple days, it started to sink in. I'm not a master of arrays by any means, but at this point I have something like, an apprentice understanding of how I can use them to store data, how I can overwrite them, how I can call them, and I'm not as scared of working with them anymore. I'm going to use more of them. In fact, this entire function is going to be replacing calculating the Dibbles or accuracy, because it can. This whole system of doing the single dimensional array that I had done first before I came back and overrode the multidimensional, that was a faster and more elegant way of writing out everything in case 1, which is right here. Like, I can just do this with an array, take in those two pieces of information really quickly, and I can have. This is straightforward, but the other way is more elegant, I think. And then that information is stored into an array that can even become, the first row of the multidimensional array. These are thoughts I could not have articulated or even thought about 10 days ago. That's how much you can learn if you focus. So if you take that away, if you made it through the 22 minutes this video's run, I had a lot of fun this week. Python was a lot of fun to revisit. Doing the little 5 to 10 minute quick code videos. I really hope that benefits somebody. But if they don't, and I have, for some reason I quit coding, I left myself a breadcrumb trail. So I can come back and pick up Python really quickly, if that ever happens. But it was surprisingly easy to just slide back into the other language. I was, I bounced off inserting semicolons or curly braces a couple times, or I would do print instead of console.writeline. But it really was like, oh yeah, this is easy. This is nice. So I'm looking forward to maybe at the end of the summer, I might go back and do like the next 20 or 30 days of the 100 days of code course that I had been working on. Because I was looking at what she had set up, and I was like, oh, I don't have to do that. The blackjack game took me like 15 minutes to write. It was easy. I didn't use her ASCII graphics, though. I did cheat on that. I just gave values because I don't care about ASCII graphics, and you can't make me. So that's it. This is week 4. This is a little bit longer than I intended, but I was really proud of myself for writing this multidimensional array, because this is something that for 17, I'm in my 30s, 14 years, I wouldn't have thought I could do it. I avoided it like an idiot. Just like I quit last year in July. Idiot. So we made it through a whole month of C#. We broke a barrier that was 14 years old. It was almost this long. It's longer than 14 years. I'm doing the math wrong on that. I'm pretty sure. 17, 14. Well, I don't want to do math. It's too early in the morning. I'm still drinking my coffee. So it was a long time, and that's a little bit of healing, and it made me feel really, really good about myself and about what we're doing. And it makes me that much closer to being able to write the software, because my whole purpose with learning to do this stuff, it's self-edification, right, for sure. Something that I wanted to do for a long time, but also just having worked as a coach now in buildings and watched how difficult it can be for people who are spinning so many plates as teachers. They have so many things going on, and they have so much information at their fingertips, but there's not necessarily a useful tool tailored to what they're doing that allows them to utilize that information. And in one case, if you want to know more about C#, my progress, I'm done at this point. I'm gonna vent very briefly about one of those frustrating pieces of software that is like so close to doing exactly what we need it to do. We use Dibbles to track student reading fluency progress and also sentence level comprehension through the middle school. But we really do it through, I think K through 8. Then there's a piece of software that's designed and is extremely useful for teachers called M-Class. And I don't know who develops M-Class. I thought it was the Dibbles organization, but I could be wrong. And they only go to grade 5. or 6. And Dibbles goes to 7 or 8. So the elementary colleagues have this awesome suite of data visualization and collection and grouping, and we were like, why can't we use that for our middle school kids who need it, and this would empower the teachers? And they were like, there's just not enough demand, which is shocking to me because I know I don't work in this bubble of kids who struggle to read. This is a nationwide problem. It's a worldwide problem in Western civilization, at least. Why aren't you? I mean, it's changing values. It's not that big of a deal. I've worked with databases now. I know it would be a bigger task than I expect with my neophyte understanding, but I also know it would not be genetically different to what I already know how to do. So they weren't interested in developing it. And we have other software like the Renaissance software that's a nightmare to navigate because there's so many options and none of them do exactly what a teacher actually needs them to do. So at a certain point, I wrote enough spreadsheet systems to collect information, output the specific information that teachers need. I was writing increasingly long Excel logic line statements, sentiments. I started using Looker Studio, which was SQL adjacent for what I was doing, and then pulling information from different buildings using shared sheets and using Looker Studio reports to basically build an architecture to ease communication between instructors and administration and between buildings, and trying to make to level out or make more horizontal the access to information so that everybody would have a democratic, transparent access to usable information. That I was like, I need to just tackle this. So last year in July, I was like, let's build a game. Let's fart around and learn to code. But this year, I've come back with like a professional fire, and I want to empower teachers by writing tools for them, whether that's software or just tools. I want to empower the people that I work with and other people who care about helping kids learn more efficiently. And if that means I got to get over wounds that I gave myself 15 years ago, 14 years ago, then let's do it. Let's go head first at it, because we can learn to do these things if we go face first at it. We push with everything we got. So that's it. I'm pushing with everything that I got without trying to take away attention from my daughters, using the time that I have while I have a summer vacation going on, vacation, unpaid, unemployment, right? Have no benefits, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I've got 4 weeks left of summer, and my goal is to make the best of that, so that when my free time is restricted to the evenings after the girls are down, I can be building something, and that's what this is here on the screen, So that's what this is, an elegant way to build a solution to a problem, which is I don't want to write an if then because it's cluttery. I just want to have a simple string that only has two possible outcomes. If j is exactly equal to 0, then I want you to assign this to the array prompt variable, and if it's any other value, we can do complicated tasks. So stick with it if you're learning along with me. If you're learning Python, check out those quick code videos. I'm going to be flooding that playlist over the next 4 weeks. I think I've got like 15 in the tank. They're all less than 10-minute videos on particular things with some code alongs and examples, stuff like that. So that's it. It's been a busy week, but it's been a good week. Spent a lot of time at the beach and the pool. My mom's coming out to visit, or is out to visit the girls, so I'm gonna go help grandma get to go play with my daughters. So that's it. It's been another week. Next week will be week 5. I have no idea what's coming up next. I've been so focused on a race. So I will see you next Sunday, and hopefully have some more good news.